You are listening to Right Off the Bus.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Right Off the Bus here on Wednesday, February 17th. Pat, it's another fantastic week. Very excited to dive into it. First, we got to address a few things that we have been forgetting to address on this podcast, Pat. First, we got to shout out your boy, Matt, setting us up with that dope intro that you just heard. Intro, outro, transitions, we're using it for everything. Shout out, Matt. I know you want to talk about him real quick since he's your boy.
Yeah, I haven't done my buddy Matt any justice. I think I've been meaning to do this for 2 weeks now since we started with it. I think it was episode 6 with John Morgan. I think that's when it first started. But yeah, Matt is a good friend of mine. We've been friends since the high school days. And he's been producing music pretty much just by himself, with his own setup, everything he's got. He's bought everything he has. He's been producing music since high school. He's excellent at it. He plays guitar. He's very talented. That lovely deep voice you hear in the intro, that's his voice as well. And yeah, he's been grinding. So if you want to give him some love as well, you can check Matt out on Spotify and Apple Music at Matt Melody. And on Instagram, it's Matt Melody Music. And on Twitter, it's Matt Melody _. So if you want to check him out, we would greatly appreciate it. I know he would as well. He made that intro for us. He's got other great music on those music platforms as well. So, yeah, I finally gave you the shout out, Matt. I know you deserved it weeks ago, but I guess better late than never.
Dude, when you sent me that intro after he made it, you're like, he did everything on it. I was like, man, I wish I had that deep voice. I mean, you are listening to, like, he just,
yeah,
he was crushing it, man.
He whipped that up in like 30 minutes too. I was like, yeah, I told him kind of what I was looking for. He's like, yeah, I got some ideas. And he just threw it down in like 30 minutes and then fine tuned it. And within like an hour, we had a, 30, 40-second intro all set. So yeah, big shout out to Matt. He did great with that one.
He had it done before you even asked him, man. It was incredible. Like he was ready. He was rearing to go. He hooked it up. We definitely appreciate that, Matt. Another thing we forgot to mention, Pat, and this may be a big deal. It may not be a big deal, but hopping on Derek Carr's IG story, man. I mean, that was pretty cool. Obviously, shout out Marcus for coming on the show, Marcus McMarion. If you haven't heard it, go check that episode out. It was fantastic. Great interview with Marcus. But one of the stories he told about Derek Carr, we posted, he reposted and tagged Derek in it. Derek shared it, and that was pretty cool. I had a friend message me and say, man, you were just on a starting NFL quarterback's IG story. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty dope. You just shared it with 715,000 people, and it was by far most interacted with video. Of course, we got like 1,600 views, most likes, most comments, most saves and shares and everything. So that was pretty cool seeing Derek.
Yeah, I wish IG stories lasted more than 24 hours, but we appreciate it nonetheless. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. Definitely means we're doing something right, Pat. People are listening. If Derek Carr's watching us talk, we're doing something right?
Yeah, maybe time to get Derek on the pod. So we'll have to reach out to him.
Open invite, Derek. Open invite if you're out there listening, man. We appreciate it. So, Pat, I mean, a couple more things before we get going. I'm out of quarantine, man, when this podcast released. I just wrapped up an 18-day quarantine because of a couple positive tests, man. I'm telling you, the thing I'm most excited for is getting into the Rock Gym. The Rock Gym has been closed since December 15th because of COVID and some of the mayor's, rules in Boston and the surrounding boroughs. But, man, I'm going to be in the Rock Gym for the first time in well over 2 months. And I couldn't be more excited.
That must be killing you. And have you started building the one in your yard? I know that was a plan for you. Probably not, right?
No. It's so the weather's just been so unforgiving for me to do that. And, I like to be a tough guy and be like, oh, I could go climb out in the snow and do it. But, I haven't really had the time to commit a couple of days to it. And what a great time it would have been the past 18 days if I, had the hundreds of dollars of material I needed to buy.
And if there wasn't like 6 inches of snow in your yard, I don't know is it your yard that you're going to build it?
Yeah, out back, I cleared a space out, and yeah, there's snow, that's 7-8 inches total we got over those couple days, but Oh man, I'm just so excited to get back out into the world. I'm excited to go to work, man. I'm excited to go to work and do some closing shifts. Like, I'm just happy to be out, man. I'm looking forward to it. And Pat, one more thing before we dive into our show that we're super excited for. We have an awesome interview with Jeff Lemieux and everything else that we want to share with you guys. But Chris Hogan, Pat, Chris Hogan, obviously been in the NFL for 10 years, whatever it is, been a really solid receiver for a long time. He has put his name into the Professional Lacrosse League draft, which I think is fantastic. He's a 33-year-old free agent who's entering the entry draft. And not many people know this guy was a 4-year player at Penn State for lacrosse. This is his first sport. He said, getting back to the best sport in the world. And his coach, while he was at Penn State, after earning all division honors and everything, said, he's the best midi in Division I lacrosse, which I'm curious to see, can Chris Hogan just step into another professional sport? Like
Yeah,
I'm
I didn't even
pumped.
know that he played lacrosse. I mean, the fact that he was that good too. I mean, it makes sense now that you say it, looking at Chris Hogan and what he looks like and like his body
Right.
type. He look, and just, by his looks. He looks like a guy who would play lacrosse and be very good at it. Maybe he'll start growing his hair out too. He'll get that lax flow.
I'd love to see it, man. I love athlete crossovers. And of course, he was very elite at lacrosse at the time in college, but you've been away from the sport for a minute and you've been having people bash into your head on a football field for 10 years. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Chris Hogan.
Yeah, interesting. We've never seen a NFL athlete also be a lacrosse player, right? We've seen, Russell Wilson, baseball and football. We've seen Bo Jackson, everything like that. Usually, typically, it's baseball. Actually, thinking about it, but
Yeah.
never a dual football and lacrosse player.
And I know nothing about lacrosse or the Pro Lacrosse League, and I'm not going to
No,
pretend to, but I'd
no
love to
idea.
see him on the Boston Cannons, man. I would go to a game if Chris Hogan was on the team. It's probably
Yeah,
only like
you might,
$15.
yeah,
Why not?
you might put people in the seats. So
There's a chance, man. There's a chance now. Getting on to some actual football, Pat. If I'm talking about Chris Hogan, it's time for a little huddle up. Even though the football season's over, which is very sad, we had our first Sunday without football in a long time. There's still a lot going on. This is still wanting to be the drama league. It's trying to compete with the NBA, and I'm here for it. There's a lot of quarterback movement, a lot of trade speculation. And something that really kind of came out of the blue this week, Pat, was J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt and the Houston Texans mutually agreed to part ways, so they cut him, save them a bunch of money, let him get an early free agency, let him go out and test the waters fast. He's been there for 10 years. He's maybe the greatest player in the history of your franchise. He's an all-time great. He's a Hall of Famer, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Where do you see some potential fits for J.J. Watt, Pat?
yeah, I'd say J.J. Watt's more than paid his dues down in Houston. He
Oh,
definitely
yeah.
deserves to move on at this point, especially with the direction that the Texans are heading in. If they lose Deshaun Watson, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. And we were talking about this earlier. I think the thing that makes the most sense and where he might end up going, I know he wants a championship, but if he went to the Steelers, I think it would just make the most sense. He's got two of his brothers there. He's got TJ, and then what's the other one? Is it
Derek.
Derek? I thought so. Yeah. So I mean, playing with your two brothers, what are the odds of that? I don't know. It depends. Like, do you want the best opportunity for a championship, or do you want to finish out your career playing with your brothers? I mean, that's probably every mom and dad's dream, at least with, your kids as athletes. If you were able to play, if all three of your boys are playing together, that would be pretty cool. It'd be a good story. So I saw a comparison. It was like the Steelers are going to collect the Watt brothers like the Infinity Stones and Thanos. They can make the final snap when they get J.J. Watt. So that was pretty good. And, they would be insanely good. And that all depends on if Ben Roethlisberger stays. If that would be their best chances of both winning a championship and getting J.J. Watt. If Roethlisberger stays and if he's going to be able to perform, like he did this year, he performed great. I mean, I know they choked once it came down to the end in playoff time, but you never know. It could work out. We'll see what happens with Juju. I know there's trade talks with Juju as well. It's really a question mark of where the Steelers are going to be. But I don't know. Where do you think he makes the most sense? Because for me, it is the Steelers. But like you were talking about earlier, you think, obviously he wants the championship. He's put in his dues in Houston. They haven't had much success.
Right. So that's the big thing for me too, is JJ Watt has done so many great individual things, but that team has just never gotten to where it should have been with JJ Watt and D Hop and Deshaun Watson and man, the list goes on. Jadeveon Clowney. How do you lose all those guys? I saw someone tweeting about Houston and they said you really lost 4 or 5 stars in football and Russell Westbrook and James Harden and George Springer, and just the list goes on.
and
Houston has
George,
lost
and George
everybody.
Springer.
Yeah,
Yeah, even
dude.
the Astros are down bad.
Yeah, I think Carlos Correa left too, man. Like, just everybody's leaving. And man, I feel bad for Houston, but you were asking, where do I see the fit? I think that the Steelers do make the most sense. Like you said, you're going to play with two-year brothers, man. I mean, it's a storybook ending, but if you're looking for a championship, which I think that is what JJ Watt has to do, right? He has everything else. He has the defensive player of the years, he has the sacks, he had MVP votes one year as a D end, and he was playing tight end, catching balls. It was unbelievable. But this guy's done everything. He needs to go win. I think one situation that is particularly interesting for me is the Green Bay Packers. JJ Watt's from Wisconsin. He went to Wisconsin. The guy is Wisconsin through and through. He still has a beautiful house up there. I think his family still lives up there. So going and joining the Green Bay Packers, who are a team that do not really sign free agents, they are all about in-house talent. They're all about building through the draft, and they don't go out and make the splashes as often as they should. I'd like to see them do it for JJ Watt, especially if there's mutual interest. Now, obviously, the Packers didn't get it done this year, but Aaron Rodgers was MVP, best player in the league. And I think that defense could use a little boost. If you get JJ Watt, that is a pretty big boost if he stays healthy. Of course, as a Pats fan, I'm sitting here dreaming about JJ Watt. I've been wanting Watt on the Patriots for a long time. There were Gronk for Watt trades talked about years ago, but I don't really see the Patriots being in contention unless they go out and get Deshaun Watson, which they're probably not going to do. But I want JJ Watt to win. The Titans have interest, the Bucks have interest, the Packers have interest. I want him to win, so I'm not mad if he goes to the Bucks and ring chases. I'm not mad if he goes to the Pack to try to win a ring there. I'm not mad if he ring chases. I'm really not. I'm here for it. It's a different time in the NFL. People want to add those things to their resume. There's a lot more player movement. JJ, go ring chase if you got him, man.
I feel like for the Patriots, they never make big splash moves like that either. I mean, obviously they went and got Antonio Brown, but they didn't have to spend a ton of money to do that. Back when they got Josh Gordon, that was also big publicity. But again, they didn't spend a ton of money to do it. I feel like they're very conservative with their spending. I feel like they like to do it through the draft and pick up, cheaper free agents. Because I feel like the system that Belichick has there, it works they don't need superstars. I feel like they build just a solid core team. And again, I mean, they had Gronk and everything, but they didn't go out and pay big money for Gronk or Edelman. It's like they kind of developed as Patriots. Same with Brady, obviously.
Yeah, the only splash in the past couple of years has been Stephon Gilmore, and that has to be the quietest splash there is. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
make this guy the highest paid corner and your biggest defensive signing ever, but how quiet of a splash is Stephon Gilmore? You sign an elite cornerback that goes from like top 10 status to top 3 status once he joins the Pats. And it's a lot of money, but he doesn't say a lot. He's not outspoken in the media. It's a Patriots guy. So
Yeah,
like you
absolutely.
said, not really a big splash kind of team, but
Yeah, so I know.
I'm just saying I'd like to see a splash, but probably not what's happening with the Pats.
Yeah, I just for that reason I just don't see the Patriots going after Watt. I mean, like you and all Patriots fans, I'm sure you would love to have him. I know my buddy posted immediately. He's like, at the Patriots on Twitter. He's like, so are we gonna just hop on this or what's going on? But yeah, Watt. I would say Steelers and then Packers or Bucks. I mean, that would be dangerous. The Bucks just won a Super Bowl. If they were to add JJ Watt to that defense that's already playing phenomenally, I mean, imagine that front line coming at you without what JJ Watt, Shaq Barrett. What was I'm blanking on the other guy's name. We talked about him
JPP,
last week.
Vita Vea,
Yeah, Pierre Paul, Vita Vea. Vita Vea
Sue,
was the one I was thinking about. Yeah, and Dominican Sue.
a
I know.
D-line rotation. Whew, whew.
Yeah, I got to get their D line ingrained into my head because if they get JJY, that's all that's going to be talked about next year for the Bucks. And then the offense they have, we're talking about one of the best rosters of all time. And with the Packers, again, that might be the boost they're looking for. Because again, their offense is unreal. I think next year you're going to see only improvement in Devonta Adams, Allen Lazard, Valdez-Scantling, Aaron Jones, all those guys. Aaron Rodgers is going to keep doing Rodgers things. The offense is fine as it is, but if they can add the defensive boost that they're looking for, I mean, look no further than J.J. Watt for sure.
Yeah, hey, and speaking of Aaron Rodgers, Pat, if we want to dive a little bit into some of the NFL honors that happened, in the past couple of weeks. So Rodgers won MVP, and I don't think there should be any debate about it. But do you see any conversation there? Or is it Rodgers all the way?
Yeah, the only debate really, I mean, you had guys like Josh Allen who were great, but he didn't perform the same as Rodgers. I mean, there's no question there in terms of quarterback play. The only person you can really make an argument for, I think, is Derrick Henry, who also won Offensive Player of the Year, which those two kind of confuse me, like Offensive Player of the Year and MVP, because typically they're offensive players anywhere or anyway. So, I guess Rodgers was probably more valuable to the Packers than Henry was to the Titans, but that man carried the Titans. He had over
Oh yeah.
2,000 yards, 17 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he had probably a top 3 rushing season of all time. So, and I don't think Rodgers did in terms of quarterback seasons. I mean, he had a great quarterback season, but top 3 of all time, I just don't think so. And
MVP is a quarterback award. Offensive
it is.
rookie, I
Yep.
mean, not offensive rookie. Offensive player of the year is best non-quarterback offensive player. Like that's
Yeah.
how I see it.
Typically, it's the same thing with the Heisman too. I mean, typically it's a quarterback every year. Although this year, didn't a receiver win the Heisman? I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, no, and of course now I'm blanking on his name real quick, but that's stud. No, Devonta Smith from Alabama,
Yep.
dude. Dude
Yeah.
is next level, skinny as anything you've ever seen, man. Doesn't even look like he can hold, the shoulder pads up, man. His hips are about this big, but man, that dude is elite, man. Elite, top
Yeah.
5 pick
So
in the
we,
draft.
so we finally saw something different in college football. But in terms of the NFL, I think it just gets even worse with the bias for quarterbacks. It's like running backs just don't stand a chance. He would have had to have about 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns to win MVP, I think. And the
It's
Titans,
true.
I mean, the Titans made the playoffs. What was their record? 11-5.
Yeah, they had a
I don't
great
know.
year.
It's not like the Packers made it to the Super Bowl. I don't know what. That's the only argument. I'm nitpicking. I think Rodgers did deserve MVP. I'm just saying that's the only argument I could see being made.
Yeah, and that means that you agree that Henry should be offensive player of the year, right? Because I think
Absolutely.
I think that's how it should work because I don't think it's how it should be, like you're saying, but how it is MVP's quarterback, best quarterback, and then offensive player is best non-quarterback. Like
Yep.
that's just because I mean Mahomes could have won offensive player of the year, right? Why didn't Rodgers win offensive player of the year? Because he won
Yeah.
MVP.
Absolutely. Yep.
It is a little ridiculous. Now, defensive player of the year. This one was talked about a little bit, but I think they got it right. And I talked about this last week in what we've learned, but I think Aaron Donald absolutely deserved defensive player of the year. You look at his sacks, tackles for losses, pressures, everything. And then if you just watch any tape on Aaron Donald, this dude's getting double teamed, triple teamed, kind of changing what a defensive tackle can do because this guy is a nose tackle that is 290 pounds of pure muscle. And oh my goodness, this dude will move an entire offensive line. Like I said last week, J.J. Watt was saying, well, look at T.J. Watt's numbers, and T.J. Watt had a great year. But when you're saying, well, look at these slightly better pass rush numbers from an edge pass rusher compared to a defensive tackle, I think it speaks volumes. D tackles are not supposed to put up the numbers that Aaron Donald puts up. This guy
Mhm.
is a wrecking ball. He is an all-time great defender, and he is probably on a top 7 to 8 defensive lineman list of all time. So shout out Aaron Donald. I think you deserved it.
Yeah, and again, that's the only argument that can be really made there. It's between two guys. It's Aaron Donald or TJ Watt. Like you said last week, defensive ends deserve more credit for what they do than perhaps a linebacker does. JJ Watt posted the stats side by side of Donald and TJ, but again, they're totally different positions, and that doesn't factor in the pressure that they bring as a defensive end. I mean, linebackers all about statistics. So the more sacks you get, you have a chance for interceptions as well. It's like defensive ends aren't getting interceptions really. They aren't padding the stats. It's more of like an unwritten thing of what they do, exactly what they bring. It's so if you just look at stats, it's kind of unfair to Aaron Donald. I would agree with you that he deserved defensive player of the year.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So another one that I thought was pretty clear, and I talked about this when maybe episode 2, 3 when we're talking playoffs. But Kevin Stefanski, coach of the year, I don't think there should be any question. The season that the Browns had, I mean, the talent on that roster is not very different from the talent that was on it last year. And the fact that Stefanski came in, brought this team to the playoffs, got them their first playoff win in 20-something years, man. It was really, or 18 years, 2003, I think. Really incredible what this Browns team did. Stefanski came in, completely overhauled the offense, made Baker Mayfield a legit NFL quarterback, like to the point where he's a top 15, top half quarterback in the league. Like that's a big improvement for Baker. I love how he brought that Vikings offense, the 2 tight end sets, the play action heavy team. I thought it was fantastic. I think Stefanski ran away with this award. I thought his offense was fantastic. I think what he did with such a bad franchise, like this team is so historically bad. It's not even close how bad this team is compared to other teams. So shout out Stefanski. I think he deserved it.
With a team like the Browns, again, like you were kind of hinting to, it's not just about, turning the team around. It's about turning around an entire culture because they've had a losing culture for so long. It's like, how do you completely do a 180 and start to build a winning culture within a franchise? And it's exactly what Kevin Stefanski did. You take, the talent they had. Obviously, they had good talent. They lost Odell Beckham, so that was an obstacle to overcome, even though it seemed to gel better when he wasn't there. I find it hard to believe that you're not a better team with Odell Beckham on the field. Yeah, he changed the culture in the locker room. He changed it with the fans. I think the fans have a different perspective now. They're probably going to expect success, which is what you want out of a franchise. I mean, there's plenty of franchises where, like the Browns were, you don't expect your team to do well. You expect a 500 season or less. I mean, that should be what the Cowboys are expecting at this point. I don't remember the last time they had a great winning season. It's the same thing there. The fans expect success every year there. They kind of have the mindset of a winning culture, but they haven't had a winning culture in forever. We'll see when Dak Prescott gets back, but that's besides the point anyways. Yeah, Kevin Stefanski deserved it. I mean, sometimes you allude to giving it to the Super Bowl winning coach. I mean, Bruce Arians had a great season down in Tampa Bay, but if you look at the team he had, you look at the talent he had the best quarterback of all time. They weren't going to do that with Jameis. It took bringing in Tom Brady to make everything work. And the defense did step up. But I think bringing Brady's presence into the locker room was a big help to Arians. I don't think it was, all Bruce Arians. I think Kevin Stefanski did a better overall head coaching job. Kudos to Arians for changing around the offense to fit Brady's system a little bit, like we saw in the Super Bowl and the playoffs. They were using the running backs a little more, using the passes, the short little slants. It was more of what we saw out of Brady in New England. So kudos to Arians there. But yeah, I would say he's the only argument there, and that Stefanski probably deserved it.
Yeah, Stefanski was fantastic. And you mentioned the Cowboys, and when you said, I was just thinking, if Stefanski was in Dallas and Dak was healthy, that team's winning 12 games.
I would say so.
Stefanski was doing it in Cleveland, man. He was doing it in Cleveland. Now, defensive rookie of the year went to Chase Young, number 1 overall pick, Washington football team. Pat, I got no problem with this at all. The stats are there. This kid's an absolute wrecking ball. That team got to the playoffs. They won their division somehow, some way, and that defensive line is scary what they're building there. Chase Young is going to be all pro in his career. Jonathan Allen's a killer in the middle, man. And Montez Sweat, a lot of Ohio State on that defense. Shout out Connor Howell, loving all that with the Washington football team. But yeah, I got no problem with Chase Young winning defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, we can almost breeze by that one. I don't even know who else would have been in the conversation. I can't think of any names that outplayed Chase Young in terms of defense. And then the fact that the Washington football team got a playoff berth, I mean, that only adds to it. A lot of it was because of their defense and how well they played. And comeback player of the year, Alex Smith, which leads us into the next award. Comeback player of the year, Alex Smith. I think this is also just a consensus, hopefully nationwide consensus. Although there was that one pesky guy, Chandler, that you don't agree with. And I would like to hear your thoughts on that as well, because I mean, I know we're both in agreement about Alex Smith. He deserved it. We said last week, he probably deserves an award renamed after him. So who was the one guy? I don't know if you remember the one guy's name.
I still don't know his name. I haven't even bothered to look it up, man. And who knows if it's anonymous or whatever. But yeah, 49 out of 50 votes. We talked about it last week. That's disgraceful. This should have been unanimous. this is kind of ridiculous that he wasn't unanimous comeback player of the year. We both said he should have the comeback player of the year renamed for him, the Alex Smith trophy, unlike that ridiculous Roselle trophy, whatever that Super
Yeah,
Bowl
the guy we
MVP
don't know.
trophy is, the commissioner. Yeah, we're just uneducated, Pat. But no, Alex Smith should have won it, and I don't think there really should be any debate. I put up an Instagram story and said, do you think this should be renamed after Alex Smith? And like 80 something percent of the votes. And, there was only 28 or 30 votes or whatever, but 25 people were saying, yes, it should be because what Alex Smith went through this year. Like I said, check out his E60 if you want to see the struggle and grind he went through, because, man, it is tough, man. It is tough. Shout out Alex Smith now. We got
that
two.
Guy,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that guy voted for Big Ben, didn't he? The one guy we don't know his name, but the one vote, the whatever 49-1, it was for Big Ben, which is, I mean, in any other season, that's a fair pick. I mean, Big Ben came back from like not even playing to Steelers went 12-4, won the division, so I mean that is accurate. I think in any other season, but you got to not have a soul to vote for Alex Smith.
Yeah, not when you have the greatest comeback story in the history of the NFL. like,
yeah,
dude, last
absolutely.
week you were just like, this guy almost died.
Yeah, what else? What else does it take? Guy almost loses his leg.
It takes
and
actual
his
death.
He almost orphaned like 3 kids and a wife, and someone votes for Big Ben.
Oh man, and we're not gonna act like Big Ben's the family man that Alex Smith is either. So get out.
No, we love you, Ben, but yeah, we can't pretend.
Get out of there. Get out. Anyways, Pat, we got 2 more real quick. Offensive Rookie of the Year now. I'm not mad at Justin Herbert winning this award, and this is something that I genuinely believe. If I only have a problem with one award, then they did a fantastic job picking these. Where they did. Now, we're nitpicking saying 49-1, right? We're like, that's ridiculous. Alex Smith blew Ben Roethlisberger out of the water. Now, Justin Herbert, I think it should have been closer with Justin Jefferson. I'm not mad that Herbert won it, man. Herbert, he set a bunch of records. The rookie record for most passing yards. Kid threw 4,336 yards. That's nuts for a rookie year, especially one where they didn't win. Like, this dude was just slinging it. Now, 31 touchdowns, rookie record. 396 completions, rookie record. This kid was slinging it. He's going to be very good. Gives me Josh Allen vibes. But Justin Jefferson, he had such a good year too. And the fact that you filled in Stephon Diggs' shoes and came in and was better than Adam Thielen as a first-round pick, I think Justin Jefferson, I think this should have been split 51-49. Justin Jefferson had 88 catches, 1,400 yards as a rookie. 1,400 yards, man. 7 touchdowns. Like, this kid was absolutely balling all year. He was a top 10 receiver in the league. So this is the only one that I was like, I don't love Herbert, but it's hard to deny Herbert, especially when neither team won much. Neither team were in the playoffs. True. Neither team were 500.
Definitely.
So it's like, all right, how much can we say that this guy deserves this for contributing to success of his team? At least Chase Young won his division, even though they were horrible.
Technically won the division, yeah.
These guys won nothing. They set some records. They were doing some pretty incredible things, but I just want to give some love to Justin Jefferson, man. Boy was killer all year.
Again, it's a little bit of the quarterback bias, right? I mean, again, Herbert did have an amazing season. The fact that he had a QBR of 98.3 for an entire season, especially as a rookie, 15 games played, incredible. 66.6 completion percentage, 4,300 yards, over 30 touchdowns as well. That is crazy to think about for a rookie quarterback. I would love to go back and look at some of the best quarterbacks and their rookie numbers, I'd love to look at Brady when he finally got a full season. I don't know.
Peyton Manning led the league in interceptions his rookie year.
Exactly. And look at him. I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame, but he's certainly going to be. He might have just gotten inducted, actually. He did. He was in this year's class. Yep. Again, shout out real quick, Calvin Johnson as well. I think he got inducted. So big shout out to Megatron. But yeah, Justin Jefferson, you look at what he did. I mean, he stepped in to fill some pretty big shoes in Stephon Diggs, right? The Vikings needed a number 2 receiver because obviously they have Thielen, they have Kyle Rudolph at tight end, who's a good receiving tight end, but they needed the true number 2 receiver. And you look at what he did. I mean, Thielen had a great season too, but for Jefferson to almost put up 90 receptions, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, which is very good for a rookie. I mean, he could have had more, but 7 touchdowns is a lot. I see no argument here. I know it's quarterback bias. I think Herbert deserved it. He put up great numbers. I think he's going to be the quarterback of the Chargers for the future. I know my buddy Chris would love to hear that. He's a Chargers fan. Poor Chargers fan living in Massachusetts. I don't know. That's what seems to happen with
How'd
the
that
Chargers.
happen?
I don't know. Now that they're in LA, I mean, how am I a Ravens fan in New England? It just sometimes we don't make sense. But I see no argument. Justin Jefferson put up, I think he was the second best rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year. So kudos again to Herbert. Yeah, he deserved it.
Yeah, and Pat, the last big honor, there's a bunch more, like the FedEx Air and Ground Players of the Year or whatever they do. I got no interest in that. The U.S. Postal Service ground player. But the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Now, the NFL community considers this the most prestigious award. Like this is bigger than an MVP, but this is off the field stuff. This is what you're doing with your charities and foundations and what you're doing with outreach in your community and all this different stuff. And there's 32 phenomenal men, nominated for this award every single year. And luckily all of their charities and foundations get donations for being nominated and everything. But Russell Wilson comes out on top in this, man. And I just went to the NFL's website and I just wanted to read real quick part of his acceptance speech, what he said after he won this. And I just think this shows exactly why Russell Wilson won this, man. So bear with me. I don't want to sit here and, read this article, but just bear with me real quick because I think this is incredible. He says, "Dad, I know one of your favorite athletes of all time was Walter Payton, the player he was, but more importantly, the man, the leader, the giver, the person. Man, Dad, I wish you were here for this award," Wilson said upon the presentation from Calais Campbell, who won it last year. He said, "This moment, Dad, I can remember you telling me in the car one day, son, love changes things. Well, Dad, you were right. I wish you were here to tell the world that the toughest times in 2020, I'm messing this up, that in the toughest of times, 2020 was the most difficult in times. To America, to the world, love is patient, love is kind, love changes things. The great Walter Payton said, we are stronger together than we are alone." And he just continues talking about his dad, man, and love and all these positive things. Now, Russell Wilson, his foundation fed 175 different communities during COVID. He donated $1 million to Feeding America, which is the largest hunger relief organization in the country. And his organization, Why Not You, was just feeding everybody, man. Russell Wilson is just such a phenomenal guy. He's been at the Seattle Children's Hospital every single week, it seems, since he got to Seattle. I just want to shout out Russell Wilson, man, because this is an incredible guy. I loved listening to his speech, and it's so hard not to be a fan of Russell Wilson. It's so hard not to be.
Yeah, he's one of the good guys for sure. He's just a model quarterback. Like if your kids are playing sports, you probably want to model after the type of personality and the type of attitude Russell Wilson has. So yeah, he is a true role model. I know a lot of these guys have foundations. It's amazing what NFL players do. I think that's like them in the NBA give back to the community the most. I think I always see everything. All these guys have foundations. So for Russell Wilson to win that award, yeah, that was great.
A lot of fun talking NFL honors, Pat, but it's time to transition and move on to our Under the Radar segment. We have a fantastic interview with Jeff Lemieux, so enjoy it. Check it out. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so our next guest on Right Off the Bus on our Under the Radar segment is Jeff Lemieux, who is a senior writer and editor for Pat and I's favorite MLS team, the New England Revolution. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on today to talk a little bit about what you do, a little bit about the Revs and the MLS in general.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation for sure. We are two lifelong Revs fans, so definitely excited to dive into it. So just to start off, Jeff, can you talk about what you do for the Revs as a senior staff writer and editor, from writing for the website to hosting the interviews on YouTube and everything else involved that you do?
Yeah, so I kind of describe myself when people ask what my role is with the Revs as sort of an in-house reporter. Obviously, it's a little more complex than that, but generally, those are kind of the responsibilities of the position. Is you kind of think of how somebody would cover the team as a reporter, and we do a lot of that just from within the organization. So a lot of interviews with the players, on-camera hosting, written stories. We host a podcast. So all of the type of content that you would imagine a media outlet would produce about the New England Revolution, that's what we're doing, but we're doing it from within the organization. So we get a little bit of a different perspective. We get a little bit of different access because we're in the building all day, every day. We're traveling with the team. We're on the road with the team. So we do try to provide a bit more of that kind of behind the scenes access, but basically any content that you see produced on revolutionsoccer.net or that goes out through the Revolution social channels, whether it be a written story or a podcast or an on-camera video interview, that's all coming through our digital department, which I play a role in.
Awesome. And you've been with the Revolution for quite some time now in that variety of different roles. Can you talk about working your way up through the Revs over the years and to where you manage your own team?
Yeah, so it's funny you guys mentioned you're lifelong Revs fans. I'm a lifelong Revs fan as well. Maybe not quite as a lifelong because I think I'm a little bit older. So the Revs weren't a team until I was 11. But from the time the Revs came into existence when I was 11, I grew up in Massachusetts, about an hour and a half away from Foxborough. So I became a massive Revolution fan back in their inaugural season in 1996. And I always knew I wanted to get into sports and work in sports. And coming out of Ithaca College with a sports information and communications major, I was looking to get into sports writing or sports PR. And I ended up working in the athletics department at MIT for a couple of years, just covering a variety of different sports there, writing game recaps about water polo and rifle and gymnastics and all of these various different sports, getting this experience. And after a couple of years at MIT, the job the job description just came through a coworker of mine's email. She forwarded it along to me, knowing that I was a Revolution fan, that I might be interested in working with the Revs. I applied, ended up getting the job, which I was not expecting. And I worked for 2 years in PR with the Revolution to start. I was a communications coordinator. So I was much more behind the scenes, writing press releases, writing your PR style game recaps, creating game notes, setting up interviews. And it was kind of by chance that I ended up in the digital realm in 2010. So going into my third season with the Revs, we didn't really have a digital department. At that time, teams weren't producing a lot of their own in-house content. That was kind of the time when teams started to move in that direction a little bit. So 2010, we decided to create our own digital department. It was just going to be a little 2-person department, basically a manager / videographer, and then a staff writer and online host. And I was part of the group of people who was hiring that position. I was going to stay in PR, and I was helping try to find a staff writer and online host for the club. And we went into the 2010 Super Draft, and we hadn't hired a staff writer and online host yet. So I kind of stepped into that role at the draft just to help out, conducted some on-camera interviews with our GM, our head coach, our draftees on the draft floor. And we came out of the draft, and I think both me and our digital manager who was hiring the position, we kind of looked at each other, and I was like, I kind of enjoyed that. And he was like, I think you were all right with it. Like, do you want to do it? So that's how I got into the digital side of it from PR, was just by chance. We didn't have anybody to do it at the 2010 draft, so I did it, enjoyed it, and kind of just slid into the digital side. And it's been a progression since there. This will be my 12th season in digital, 14th with the Revs overall, 12th in digital. And our digital department has just expanded rapidly since then, as I think digital departments have expanded in every professional sports club since then. So, we went from that initial department of a manager / videographer and a writer to we now have our director, who was the manager at the time. He is now our director. We've got 2 full-time videographers, 2 full-time on-camera hosts and writers. We have a full-time social media position, an email marketing coordinator who does graphic design. We're now like a 7-person department. So it has just continued to expand. And I've continued to take on kind of a greater role as the years have rolled on, and it's been a lot of years.
That's awesome that you've been with the team for such a long time, and you've clearly been able to adapt to a lot of different roles, and you seem like you're having a great time doing it. I mean, can you talk about seeing the league, the MLS, grow a little bit, as you have been with the Revs for so long? Can you talk about that exponential growth that we've seen with the league in general?
It's kind of crazy to even think back to what the league looked like when I started in 2008, because being in the league for the past 14 years, it has happened rapidly, but gradually enough over those 14 years that it's not like you snap your fingers and I've noticed the growth. It happened gradually over the course of those 14 years for me. But when I think of what this league looked like in 2008, I think it was a 12-team league at the time. Maybe 2 or 3 teams were playing in their own stadiums. Columbus, LA, Chicago. Those were maybe the only 3 teams that were playing in their own soccer-specific stadiums when I started in this league. Over the course of the past 14 years, the league has not only doubled in size in terms of teams. More than half the teams that are in the league right now did not exist when I started in Major League Soccer. Almost every team, unfortunately, does not include the New England Revolution, but we're looking to get there, has a soccer-specific stadium at this point. And it has just gone from kind of this fringe league trying to find its footing and trying to find its voice to, I think, finding that voice and kind of understanding what it is a little bit. And it doesn't seem like it's going to stop growing anytime soon. It feels like it has been on an upward trajectory for a while now, and it feels like that upward trajectory is just going to continue.
Well, we do hope that the Revs get their own stadium. Maybe that'll help their growth out.
As do I.
Well, Jeff, you mentioned you attended Ithaca College up in New York. That's actually where my brother graduated as well. And even though you're originally from the Cape, did you know at that time going to Ithaca that you were going to go into sports journalism and that was a career path you were headed towards?
I did, yeah. So, growing up, I knew I wanted to be involved in sports, but I think like most people who eventually get involved in sports broadcasting, I wanted to be a professional athlete when I was a kid. That's what I wanted to do, was to play pro sports. But you eventually you come to that realization at some point that maybe playing professional sports isn't going to be the path for me. You probably get to, freshman, sophomore year in high school, and you're like, if I was going to be a pro, maybe I would have been on a little bit of a better path right now. So at that point, the thought process changes a little bit. So, well, how can I stay involved in sports if I'm not going to be a professional athlete? And I knew I enjoyed writing. I always tell this story about kind of like, when did you know you wanted to get into sports writing and sports broadcasting? This is a true story. I literally used to play FIFA growing up, and I would play a game of FIFA with a pen and notepad next to me, and I would take notes throughout the course of the game: who scored, when they scored, how the goal was scored, the kind of the story of the game. And then I would write a game recap after the game about the FIFA game that I just played. And I just did that for fun because I liked telling the story of the game. So when you do something like that, you're like, maybe this is something maybe there's a career there for me. Maybe I could do this as a career. So when I was looking at colleges, I think there were 3 colleges in the country at the time, because this was way back in the olden days in 2001 when I was looking at colleges. And I remember looking at Bowling Green, I think UMass Amherst, and Ithaca were 3 of the only schools in the country that had specific sports journalism programs. Anywhere else you went, you could go into sports management, or you could go into journalism. You could be an English major. But only a few schools in the country were actually focused on sports communications and sports journalism. And Ithaca was one of those schools. So I actually went on a visit to Ithaca my junior year in high school, and I didn't really like the campus. I wasn't a huge fan when I went on the school visit, but I knew that I wanted to work in sports journalism so badly, and I knew that Ithaca was going to put me on that path enough that I said, this is probably more so my parents. My parents would say they were the ones who pushed me towards Ithaca and said, look, if you want to be a sports journalist, this is where you got to go. So I kind of begrudgingly went to Ithaca, knowing that was what was going to be right for me in terms of getting into sports broadcasting. And once I actually got to Ithaca, I absolutely loved my 4-year experience at Ithaca. Loved the campus, loved the school, loved the area, and up in central New York, out in the middle of nowhere. So it really worked out, but it was definitely the academics and the knowledge that I wanted to get into sports broadcasting that sent me to Ithaca. Otherwise, based on the visit that I had there when I was in high school, I probably wouldn't have ended up there.
I was just going to say, sounds like me when I took my tour at Westfield. Rainy, Thunder. I was the only person on the tour, and I'm like, how did I end up choosing to go here? This makes no sense. And then I had a great experience, so I can definitely relate there.
Well, so the funny thing is when I visited Ithaca, it was like this gorgeous, beautiful summer day. Everybody was out on the quads, hanging out, and it was like the typical. You would have assumed it was like the typical college experience, and it's complete opposite of what Ithaca, New York is actually like. It snows from like September to April. It's cold. You're right on the lake, so it's windy. So it should have actually driven me to go there. I think what I didn't like when I initially visited was it is kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's Ithaca, which is this fantastic college town with like 30,000 college kids, because you've got Ithaca College and Cornell, and there's basically nothing else there. It's just a big college town. But for like an hour in every direction, there's nothing. Until you hit Syracuse, you're not going to see much of anything. So I think that was what was driving me away from it. But despite Ithaca being a cold, barren winter wasteland, it was a fantastic college experience.
And was soccer your sport of choice always? I know you mentioned you always played FIFA and wrote down notes, but was that the one that you played too? You said you wanted to play professionally at a young age, anyways.
Growing up, I played soccer, baseball, and basketball. I was never all that serious with basketball. I'm still only 5'7" right now, so basketball was probably never going to be a serious endeavor for me. Baseball, I played pretty seriously up until about freshman year in high school, and that's when I felt I could kind of feel myself starting to gravitate towards soccer a little bit. And eventually, I played baseball and soccer through sophomore year in high school, and at that point is when I moved to year-round. I'd play indoor soccer, summer soccer, fall soccer. I basically at that point was like, you know what, soccer is the direction I want to go, and started playing year-round and dropped baseball at that point. But probably up until about freshman year in high school, soccer and baseball were sort of neck and neck. But I think, honestly, it was the 94 World Cup initially kind of got me into soccer. The 98 World Cup is really what just kind of ingrained the soccer culture in me. When you see what the game means on the international level, and the people in the stands, and all of the different cultures and sounds and sights of the game at the World Cup level, I think that's what kind of sucks a lot of people into the sport, is every 4 years seeing the World Cup and what it means around the world. And it's tough to kind of get that out of your blood once it's in.
It really is the greatest spectacle in sports when it comes down to it. There's nothing better than the World Cup. I mean, there really isn't. So Jeff, can you talk about where your home base is for work? Are you in that new shiny facility over there in Foxborough? Are you working from home remotely because of the pandemic? What's your work situation like?
So at the moment, I am working remotely at home. So up until late 2019, the entire Revolution organization was in a building literally just outside Gillette Stadium. It's right next to the pro shop. There's kind of a little annex building that our entire operation was working out of from a front office perspective. And the team was based out of the locker room inside Gillette Stadium. That's where, the coaches' offices were. That's where the players were all day, every day. It was late 2019. We opened up the new training center kind of out in the back of Gillette Stadium. The team moved over there. Our academy setup moved over there. Revolution 2 moved over there. And with them went our operations, digital, and PR departments. So our marketing department, our ticketing department all stayed in the building where they are. Half the operation moved over into the training facility. Basically anybody who needed to be around the club on a daily basis. People who needed to go out to training, people who needed to interview the players, people who needed to have that interaction all the time. They moved over to the training center to be with the team all the time. But we moved in there late 2019, and obviously we were only working there on a daily basis until March 2020, when the world flipped upside down. And we were working from home exclusively from March until about June, when training started back up ahead of the MLS's back tournament. So from June onwards, we were working. It would be a little bit of both. I'd go in. We had to go into the training center every couple of days anyway to get COVID tested. We'd stay there to do what we needed to do, to interview players, to cover training, to do anything like that. And then as soon as we didn't need to be at the training facility, we'd come home. It was basically go there, do what you need to do there. But anytime you can work from home, work from home. So that was really the setup until December when the season ended. And I've been remote since then. So from December when the season ended until now, I've been working remotely at home. In a couple of weeks, when preseason kicks off, we'll go back to that setup where staff will need to go in and get COVID tested. We'll be in the office a couple days a week for 4 or 5 hours to do what we need to do, but otherwise we'll continue to work remotely at home.
Now, you mentioned the MLS's back tournament in there, and I think the MLS deserves a lot more credit for their bubble environment and being able to put that tournament on. And you were down there in the MLS bubble, so can you talk about that experience a little bit? Any fun memories or anything specific that jumps out to you thinking back to your time in the bubble?
Well, the funny, I'll start with the kind of the funny stories. We'd get COVID tested either every other day or back-to-back days a lot of the time, depending on how the testing schedule worked out. And we were down there from July 2nd to I think July 26th. And my birthday is July 5th. So I had my birthday right at the beginning of the bubble experience. And every single time we would go in and get COVID tested, you would have to say your name and your birthday to confirm that you were who you were. So almost the entire time we were down there, my birthday had just happened. Every single time I'd sit down to get tested, I'd go, yeah, Jeff Lemieux, July 5th, 1984. And I'd go, oh, happy birthday. Did you do anything fun? I was like, no, I was here. I was in the bubble, so we can't really go anywhere or do anything. So I got my birthday, but literally every day. Oh, your birthday just happened. Did you do anything fun? I got COVID tested. I guess that was the fun thing to do on my birthday. But it's funny, when that tournament was initially kind of unveiled and we heard what it was going to be and that we were going to be one of the first leagues that was going to go down and try to take on an endeavor like this. And there was just so much uncertainty. No one had really done it yet. NWSL was kind of just getting, they ended up starting their bubble a little bit before we did, but they were still kind of in the planning stages while we were in the planning stages. I know lacrosse had a similar bubble that had started around the same time we did, but when we were talking about all this, we didn't know what it was going to entail. Everything was still a little uncertain and a little scary. So you're kind of thinking, do I want to go down there and do this? What's it going to be like? Is it going to be safe? And then when we got down there, I'll tell you, for the first few days, it was a little choppy because, FC Dallas had all of their issues where they had an outbreak in their team. Nashville ended up having an outbreak in their team. Both of those clubs had to drop out of the tournament. So for the first few days, you were kind of like, is this going to work? But all credit to MLS once they were able to kind of eradicate the situations with FC Dallas and Nashville, who had clearly, contracted COVID at some point outside the bubble and brought it in. Once they were able to kind of contain those situations, the bubble was as safe as it could have possibly been. And everything went off pretty much without a hitch once you got past, kind of the Nashville and FC Dallas situations. And yeah, it really was remarkable because when we started off, there's just so much uncertainty, right? You're just wondering, is this going to work? How is this possibly going to work? But they figured out a way, and without a ton of guidance, because a lot of other leagues came after that, right? NHL had their bubble after that. Basketball had their bubble after that. It was really NWSL, lacrosse, and MLS that kind of set the stage and kind of created, a platform for these leagues. They kind of wrote the book on how to do this. So, all credit to everybody who was involved in that setup to get that done without a whole lot of guidance.
Yeah, every sport had its own, mishaps with a bubble environment. I think that was just a given. But, yeah, like you said, it was great that the MLS was going to be the first major sport back, at least the first team sport to be back doing that. But moving on to the team for a bit, Jeff, how much did Bruce Arena arriving to the team affect the culture around the club as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that it was pretty instantaneous. And I think every new coach, you're going to get that quote-unquote new coach bump a little bit regardless. Just because that's the nature of sports. Anytime there's a little something new, guys are going to get a little bit of that jolt. But when a guy like Bruce Arena joins your organization and brings the type of reputation and the type of history that he brings, it's impossible for guys to not immediately start thinking that things are going to start heading in a good direction. with Bruce Arena at the helm, a guy who's won 5 MLS Cups, has won Supporter Shields, went the deepest run that the U.S. had in modern times at a World Cup, going to the 2002 World Cup quarterfinal. Like, with him leading the charge, you can kind of back off and say, we trust what Bruce Arena is going to do.
Yep.
We don't have to worry about whether we're doing things right, whether we're heading in the right direction, anything like that. We know that Bruce Arena is the guy who can get us moving in an upward trajectory. So I think he got a little bit of that new coach bump anyway, and then he brings along his reputation, and it just kind of added to that. And I think it's funny when guys talked about what changed when Bruce Arena came in. To a man, every single player on the team talked about the fact that he treats the players like adults. And he basically says, this is when training is, this is when the game is, make sure you're here on time. Other than that, you're an adult. Make sure that you've got yourself ready to train every day. Make sure that you've got yourself ready for the game on the weekend. He's not trying to control every little aspect of every guy's life. He's not trying to tell them when to eat. He's not trying to tell them what to eat. He's not trying to tell them when to go out and when not to go out. He basically says, you're an adult, and I know that you're going to get yourself ready when you need to be ready. And I think guys at the professional level really appreciated that, and it clearly translated on the field based on how this team turned things around in that 2019 season, from the start that they had to making a playoff run like it did at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I know it's the easy comparison, to Bill Belichick. That's what people like to describe Bruce Arena as. But when I talk to my friends and people that don't know much about the MLS and the Revs, I'm like, you got to understand who Bruce Arena is. This guy is MLS royalty. This guy is MLS Mount Rushmore. So he really has had an incredible impact on the team. And another person that just really changed the team last year was Carles Hill when he came back. Can you talk about the feeling around the club? In a similar sense to Bruce Arena, when Carles Hill came back at the end of last season, the team seemed to change. And obviously, I mean, in my opinion, he might be the best number 10 there is in the MLS. But can you talk about what the team was like when Carles Hill made his return at the end of last season?
Yeah, I mean, look, you would like to build a squad, and I think the Revs have, in a sense, built a squad that doesn't have to, rely on that one guy to make everything click. But when it's a player like Carles Hill, who so much of the game revolves around, if you take that guy, your best player, your playmaker, the guy who is your engine, who makes everything click, you take him out of that lineup, you're going to be worse. That's just the way that it is. So the Revs, without Carles Hill for basically the majority of the 2020 season, had to try to find a way to kind of just grind through that 2020 season to get themselves in a position where they could still have a shot once Carles Hill got back into the squad. And I think when Carles came back in October, that was the squad that the New England Revolution had planned on having in 2020. You basically didn't really see the real Revs all year because Carles had missed the entire season, and so much of what the Revs do revolve around him. So when Carles came back into that squad and they went on that run through the late part of the regular season and then went off in the playoff run to the Eastern Conference Final, that gives everybody so much excitement about what this team can do in 2021 and beyond, because it was really only the end of the regular season and the playoffs when we really feel like we got to see the Revs as they were meant to be constructed in 2020. And you see the impact that Carles Hill has. It is unbelievable because it's not just what he's the type of player that doesn't just score goals, doesn't just provide assists, doesn't just keep things moving through midfield. He's that player who makes everybody better. When Carles Hill is on the field, all of the pieces around him are raised a level because the types of passes that he makes, the type of vision that he has, makes everybody else around him better. So you're not just getting one of the best number 10s in the league, you're raising the level of the rest of your team once he comes back in the squad. So that's what's got everybody really, really excited about 2021. It's like, all right, well, we saw that playoff run. That was the team. That was the only time we really got to see this team in 2020. Now, hopefully, we're going to get to see them for a full season in 2021.
And speaking of team building in the coming season, are there any new signings that you're particularly excited for, like Mafla, Captoom, De La Garza, or even Luis Caicedo coming back too and changing the midfield up?
Yeah, so all of those guys I think are going to have big roles to play in this squad in 2021. The guy I'm most intrigued by is Captoum, and mostly just because of his pedigree coming up through the Barcelona system, and clearly a player still at 24 years old right now, still a player who's young and kind of coming into his prime. I think the potential that he has to be a game changer in central midfield is really exciting. Christian Mafla, another guy who I haven't had a chance to really see play at all, but who I know, the Revs have been looking for years for someone to come in and kind of lock down that left back role. Basically, since Chris Tierney retired, the Revs have been looking for somebody to come in and fill that spot. So the hope is that Christian Mafla is that guy. He had a tremendous career in Colombia playing with Nacional, and a player who they're hoping can come in and lock down that spot. And yeah, AJ De La Garza, a guy who I've had a chance to interview a couple of times, even though he hasn't joined the team officially for preseason yet. And this is a guy who is just a winner. I mean, we talk about Bruce Arena and kind of the mentality that he brings into the team and having won 3 MLS Cups. AJ De La Garza is one of those guys who was on 3 of those LA Galaxy MLS Cup winning teams. He won multiple national championships in college. He won multiple national titles in his youth days. And I know not all of that necessarily translates, but this is a guy who just knows how to win. And that can be invaluable when you put that type of guy into a locker room that feels like it's on the verge. And you take a Revolution team that was in the Eastern Conference Final last year, and you add some guys like that, Captoum, who could be a game changer in midfield. A guy like De La Garza, who is a historical winner. You're hoping that those are the types of pieces that can put you over the top. And I know that Bruce Arena has said that the Reds aren't done adding just yet, or that's the hope at least. Still looking to make one potential starting addition, I think, heading into this offseason or heading into the 2021 season. I think probably still looking for a little bit of depth in central defense as well. You think about Andrew Farrell and Henry Kessler, 2 guys who pretty much locked down that central defensive role, but I think still looking for a little bit of depth beyond them. Beyond Farrell and Kessler, you've got Colin Verfurth and AJ De La Garza, who hasn't really played center back for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think probably still looking for some depth there. But when you think about a team that was on the verge of going to MLS Cup last year, brings back basically all of their major contributors from that 2020 team and adds a couple of pieces and guys like Captoum and Mafla and hopefully another potential international addition and guys like De La Garza and Boateng as well. You hope that's what can put this team over the top.
Absolutely. And everyone go check out Jeff's last couple interviews with AJ De La Garza on YouTube. They're awesome on the New England Revs page or on revolutionsoccer.net. Go check out his article talking about De La Garza wearing number 20, his connection with that, and Taylor Twellman. Obviously, Twellman, is all about the Revs history, and it's cool seeing him supporting that. But MLS in general, real quick, Jeff, two questions left. If you were in Don Garber's seat for one day, if you were a commissioner and you had executive power for one day, what would be a league-wide rule change that you'd put in if you had the chance?
Oh, man.
Just one. I immediately think about DPs.
This one ahead of time. I don't know. I might have to think about that one for a little longer. I do think what is one thing that I'll go. You know what? I'll go along with because you just mentioned Taylor Twellman. I'll take it in that direction because we've seen coming off of COVID-19 that leagues around the world had gone to 5 substitutions instead of 3 substitutions, and that was designed because players were coming off these long layoffs. They wanted to make sure that players were going to be physically able to deal with the rigors of playing the game, so they moved it from 3 substitutions to 5 substitutions. And it seems like universally amongst coaches that has been a welcome change, moving from 3 substitutions to 5 substitutions. I know some leagues around the world have moved back to 3 substitutions. I know Bruce Arena has been a vocal proponent of moving to 5 substitutions permanently. Along those lines, I do think that World Soccer, and I would love to see Major League Soccer be at the forefront of it as well, although I know it'll eventually be a FIFA kind of mandate, is the concussion substitution and making sure that is something that becomes a part of the game overall. Because you cannot, in these situations when players have head injuries, you cannot leave it up to the player. You cannot leave it up to the club, because there's just too much at stake with players' livelihoods and careers. So I think to implement a concussion substitution for teams so that they can make the right decisions with regards to player safety. Because you talked about Taylor and that kind of sparked that in my mind, I'll go that direction.
I think that's perfect. I think that's a perfect answer. Obviously, Taylor Twellman's been trying to be at the forefront of that for the past couple of years, and hopefully that is something that the MLS can kind of lead.
The last question for you, Jeff, just a real quick one. Would you mind doing some free consulting and share some advice for two 22-year-olds trying to break into the world of sports journalism, broadcasting, podcasting, all the above?
Well, I will say, to start, the fact that you've already got this podcast and you're doing this, that you're using your free time on a Sunday morning to just create a sports talk podcast is a pretty darn good start, to be honest, because when I was in college, I wasn't doing anything like this. I had a couple of internships through school where, I worked a little bit for a newspaper, the Cape Cod Times, and I worked for the Cape Cod Crusaders, who are an unfortunately now defunct PDL team at the time. But just in terms of kind of going out myself and, creating a podcast or creating a website or a blog or something like that, you guys are ahead of me. So many people feel like it seems like they're ahead of where I was at that time. So this is a fantastic start. And that's really my major advice is to create a portfolio for yourself where it doesn't matter where your content is going. It doesn't matter where a podcast is living. It doesn't matter where your written content is living, as long as you're working on that content, creating the content, and it can live somewhere. You have a portfolio to be able to show people. So when you're applying for a job, you're able to say, here's this podcast that I've created. Here's this written story that I wrote. Here's this interview that I did. If you have those materials and you can straight up show someone, here's my work, that's the best position you can possibly put yourself in, is to have that portfolio. And in creating that portfolio, the more you conduct interviews, the more you write stories, the more you do anything like that, the more you interview people, the more and more comfortable you get with it, the more you find your voice and kind of what makes sense for you in terms of, finding that written voice can be really difficult, right? Kind of how you want to portray, how you want to tell stories. You only find that by doing it over and over again. So that would be my advice. Make sure that you're writing, make sure that you're conducting interviews, hosting this podcast. Like, this is a great start. So that's my major advice, is basically just build a portfolio. You don't necessarily need to be working for a newspaper or a media outlet or anything to create your own content now. The resources are out there to just go create your own content. You guys are doing that. That's a great start. So yeah, keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the advice, Jeff. And again, thank you for coming on. Now, the interview's over. We'll give you the floor. You can let the people know what you got going on, where they can follow you to get updates on the MLS, Revolution, anything, all of the above.
Yeah, revolutionsoccer.net is where all of our content lives. So get yourself over to revolutionsoccer.net, especially in the coming weeks, because the 2021 MLS preseason will be kicking off within the next couple of weeks, late February, early March. The players will be getting back on the field ahead of April 17th, which is when the 2021 MLS season will be kicking off. So we are just getting our 2021 season rolling. Exciting times in Major League Soccer. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Lemieux. It's Lemieux. And I tweet mostly about soccer, but I throw in a little bit of Bruins talk in there as well, and some occasional witty banter. At least what I think is witty banter, at least in my own mind. But yeah, get yourselves over to revolutionsoccer.net. We're about to kick off a really exciting season. So yeah, go follow our coverage.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, Jeff. It was a blast having you, getting to talk about you, the Revs, and the MLS. And we really appreciate you taking the time and coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Just one more time to say thank you to Jeff Lemieux for coming on and joining us to talk about his career and what he does. That was fantastic. Now we're going to get on to a little UFC, Pat. UFC 258 just happened. Usman versus Burns. That was the fight to talk about. And before you dive into it, because you're a resident UFC guy, and obviously I can't speak on it like you can, I just want to say how cool it is, man, that the two best fighters in welterweight are teammates. Like, these guys practice together, train at the same gym, and they're the two best in their division. I think it says a lot about what they do as athletes, the respect they have for each other. And man, to be training with a guy like that every single day and then to have to go knock him out, man, that's scary stuff. So you want to talk about this card at all?
Yeah, I can't imagine, like, if we were fighters, we trained, and I had to go, like, knock you out, or you had to go knock me out afterwards. So not that hopefully it never comes to that. There's no podcast disputes. We're gonna knock each other out, but
we'll be good. We got a prenup.
Yeah,
We're good.
Like you said, I think these guys truly are the two best in the division, and they're only getting better. Gilbert Burns, well-rounded. Kamaru Usman, well-rounded. And the thing about Usman is that, especially what we saw in this fight, before the Masvidal fight on Fight Island, he switched up camps, which was from the camp he was with Gilbert Burns. So it was weird that he actually didn't even switch just for this camp. He switched before. So no. So that makes sense, because it was supposed to be Gilbert Burns that he was fighting on Fight Island. So that's why he switched. But then It ended up being Masvidal, last minute replacement. And then finally the Burns fight happened. So he switched. He went out to train with Justin Gaethje, who's, top contender in the lightweight division, if anyone knows him. And also the coach there, Trevor Whitman, who's one of, if not the best striking coaches in all of MMA in the UFC as well. So he's an excellent boxing coach, striking coach, and he really patented Justin Gaethje's leg kick. Gaethje already had good leg kicks, but he's the one who kind of patented them. I can't even say that word. That's so bad. Good. For Usman, I mean, yeah, his big thing was, he's kind of a pressure fighter, and he holds you up against the cage. He takes you down. And what we didn't really see out of him was elite level striking. I think the last sort of element to his fight game to become a true great champion was his striking. And that's exactly what he did with Trevor Whitman. I think they're out in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. They're somewhere out there, Midwest. But for him to improve his striking like that, especially what we saw against Gilbert Burns, I mean, it was crazy. Usman got rocked in the first round. I think he came out a little bit flat, but you saw a huge improvement in the second round. He hurt Burns terribly in the second round. He dominated it. It might have even been a 10-8 round, so I know people might not even know UFC scoring. Typically, it's 10-9 for a win of a round, but if you dominate the round, it's 10-8, so that affects the final scorecards. I think it was probably a 10-8 second round, and then 30 seconds into the third round, we saw Usman knock him out. Within 30 seconds, he knocked Burns out, and it was emotional. I mean, it was great for Usman. It was an emotional fight. I don't know if you watched, but they embraced afterwards. Yep. And, as Burns was laying there, Usman was like just staring at him like he felt like he had just did something terrible. So it was an emotional, literally, they were best friends. And, obviously in the build up to the fight, you got to sell the fight, and, there's no friendships in the cage. But immediately when it's over, you can see kind of like the mental repercussion of what, you've just done. And he was saying afterwards, he's like, I didn't want to do that. That hurt me. He said it almost broke him, I think, which is, it just speaks to like how much passion goes into fighting. And if people, don't understand the fact that it's a sport, we had John Morgan on, and like you were talking about your mom thinking it's so like barbaric, yeah, right. Which, it's she kind of like
illegal.
Yeah, it's kind of a new age thing, but like, it's not that barbaric. It's emotional, and it was great to see. But in terms of Usman, man, he is quickly becoming one of the best welterweight champions of all time, which is saying something, because if you look at the history of that division, you have BJ Penn, who at one point who was one of the greatest of all time. He still is, although at the end of the career he fell off. He lost like 7 straight or something. But
just fought way too long.
That's the thing. It's like people don't want to let go, and he fought way too long. And you had Matt Hughes, and then the greatest, I think, all-around mixed martial artist of all time, George St Pierre. I think even if you don't watch fighting or never have, that's probably a name you've heard, similar to Conor McGregor. You probably know of him. St Pierre, I think his overall record in his career was like 28-2, but he was the most dominant welterweight of all time. But Usman's quickly chasing him. I mean, Usman's 17-1 now, and he's beaten
18-1 now.
18-1
that was his
18th,
yeah.
So he's 18-1 now. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. Yeah, he's 17-1 going to that one. He beat Tyron Woodley to take it, who was at that time one of the best. he's fallen off, obviously, but maybe for what Usman did to him, he demolished him. And then he beat Colby Covington, who was his rival. Everyone would have been happy to see that happen. And then, and then after Covington, then he beats Masvidal. Now he beats Burns. And the whole thing is what's next. For Masvidal, it was kind of an excuse, a built-in excuse, at least as Usman calls it. It was 6 days' notice. He flew halfway across the world, fought him on 6 days' notice, cut 20 pounds in like 24 hours, which if anyone knows anything about weight cutting, I have some wrestling friends, that's got to just be horrific. So for Masvidal to do that, he didn't look great. I think Masvidal would put up a better fight if on a full camp. But I tell you what, if Usman tries to strictly stand with Masvidal, I think he's going to have a tough time because Masvidal's striking is elite. I think if they were to fight again, I think we would see, although Usman has improved striking, I think he would end up grappling him a lot more. So we'll see what happens next for Usman. I imagine it's probably going to be Masvidal next. I think that's the money fight for the UFC. And I think, as you know, Chandler, it's all about the money with them. It's not necessarily who's next up in line. It's about who they're going to make money off of. It's the same, with Conor McGregor fighting Nate Diaz and guys like the Khabib and McGregor fight. So the UFC doesn't necessarily follow the right matchmaking. It's just what makes sense for marketing. And I totally agree with doing that again. I mean, who doesn't want to see Masvidal fight in general? So if you were to fight for the championship and win the belt, I mean, he's already a global superstar, but I mean, you hit new heights if he wins the title from Usman, who's quickly becoming one of the greatest of all time. So we'll see what happens.
And on the other side of that, I think that the story is a lot better for Usman's legacy fighting Jorge Masvidal compared to anyone else in the division for his next title defense. Because, like Covington is up there as a top contender. We don't really want to see that fight. We want to see the guy that he fought on 6 days' notice. We want to see the guy where one of his defenses, like you said, is a built-in excuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
it's the only one that's in question.
And Usman will want to prove that. And now at 18-1, he is building a legacy for GOAT status in his division. GSP might be untouchable. And unless he has 10 title defenses in a row, Usman right now. But what was that? His fourth title defense? Something like that?
So he won the title, and that was his third title defense. And then he'll fight Masvidal again. That would be 4. And at that point, I think you get 4 title defenses. I don't see why. I mean, he's a big guy at 170. I don't see why you don't move up to 185. Maybe Adesanya is still the champion there. He's fighting at light heavyweight in March to try to get 2 belts. Maybe Usman goes up and tries to get a second belt. But if you put the 2 first, I think, Nigerian-born champions against each other, do like a pay-per-view in Africa somewhere. If they were to go to Nigeria or something. I know they want to. It's something that, Usman wants to do, Adesanya wants to do. And Matt, you have one of the biggest cards of all time. Usman, welterweight champion versus Adesanya, middleweight champion for the undisputed middleweight belt. Usman trying to win 2 belts. I think that is the move for Usman after defending another title. Obviously, if he lost, it'd be different. But if he beats, Masvidal, let's say, in his next fight, then I see no reason why you wouldn't go up.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. There's enough guys in his division to fight, but he's already beaten all of them. He's already beaten Woodley. He's already beaten Covington. He's already beaten Masvidal. Now he's beaten Burns, 4 of the top 7 guys. And, of course, I don't know the rest of his career, but a guy like Chiesa doesn't deserve that chance yet. So if he was to go up, dude, oh, my goodness, Usman, Adesanya, that would be an all-time fight.
Exactly.
All-timer.
You got Adesanya, who's like the most famous now in the UFC, pretty much. He's got like a Puma deal. He's got millions of followers. He's the biggest fighter now. He's a sensation. So if you were to do, like I said, the first 2 Nigerian-born fighters on a card like in Africa, it would be crazy. I think it'd be the first card in Africa too. So you'd have you'd have a totally different population watching. It would be great. I would love to see that happen. So, a man can dream. We'll see what happens. I'm probably looking way too far in the future, but that's what's fun about fighting is that you think about who's going to match up and what's going to happen.
And one thing that's so good about being a MMA fan is that, like you said, they're not putting together the best fights on style. They're not putting together the best fights on this and that. They're putting the best fights together on pure fan enjoyment. What is going to get people to watch? What is going to make people trash talk? What is going to make this this fight build up hype and build up, a spectacle. And there's no sport that's better at that than the UFC. So Dana White, he handpicks fun fights, dude. It's like if you and I were commissioner and we just got to handpick fights. It's literally what he does. He's like, oh
Yeah.
man, Usman Masvidal. This is
Exactly. Or are you gonna go? It's like in the lightweight division, for instance. It's Dustin Poirier, and obviously there's a guy, Charles Oliveira. He's on like an 8-fight win streak, just beat Tony Ferguson, deserves the title shot. But no, now you see they're going to do the trilogy with Conor McGregor in the summer, I think. I think Poirier wants it, McGregor wants it, and I think Dana White wants it because obviously it's going to make money. It's the rubber match. Trilogy fights are always huge. So again, they're not picking the guy who deserves it, which is Charles Oliveira, but they're going to go with McGregor again. So I feel bad for people at times because they're higher in the rankings, but at the same time, you got to understand it's a business. It's not like the MLB. It's not, like the 1 seeds, clearly the best team, and, they're making it, but it's a sport with a 4 seed. Like Masvidal, he's the 4. He's number 4 in the welterweight division, but he's probably next in line.
Yeah, it is interesting. It really is. And man, we spoke it into existence. Poirier went on Hot Ones right after we talked about it. After we were like, hot sauce, a UFC fighter, Hot Ones. Dude hops on Hot Ones with Sean Evans. I still haven't gotten to check out that episode, but I'm definitely going to. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little weird since they went remote. Like they're not in studio anymore, so they gotta do Hot Ones over Zoom. Yeah, they ship
send
them.
people the wings.
Yeah, they send them the sauce lineup, and then you gotta make the bone and wings. They probably send the wings too, but yeah, you gotta make them yourself. But
that's nuts.
Yeah, nuts. Poirier slipped in, I think, a little hot sauce ad, so it made sense for him to go on Hot Ones.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right, Pat, time to dive into what we've learned. All right, everybody, before we get on to what we've learned, gotta get a quick ad from our most loyal sponsor, Book Thinkers. So you guys already know, but if you read personal development books, you have to check out Book Thinkers. This is a company that's dedicated every single day to helping you fulfill your life through books. So every single day on Instagram and every single week on their podcast, this team over there at Book Thinkers, they're helping you discover new books, new mentors, and you can use these new tools to achieve more and live better. The right book can absolutely change your life at the right time. You can find out more by heading over to Instagram, typing in Book Thinkers, go to www.bookthinkers.com. I know I just finished chapter 3 of The Compound Effect, so get those personal development books going. Now, Pat, it's time to dive into what we've learned. So, Pat, why don't you start us off and tell us what you learned this week?
God, what I've learned, and I think probably every football fan has learned, is life is just sad without football. It's like, I know once Red Zone ends, I'm really sad because I play fantasy, and it's just like you hang out every Sunday and watch football nonstop. Scott Hansen, 7 hours of uninterrupted football. It's like, where does that exist in any other sport? It's unbelievable. Like the next closest thing is like March Madness. You get like on that Thursday, which actually that Thursday is not even happening this year. They announced the updated schedule, but now that playoffs are over, man, it's really sad. I mean, we just spent, 30 minutes talking about off-season stuff, which is fun, and I like off-season stuff. It's going to be an especially exciting off-season, so I'll make sure to keep track of that and all the trades that go on, and we'll keep you updated here on all the trade talk. But man, not watching any football, I am desperately waiting for next fall, and it'll be a good season next year. It's going to be a big shakeup. Hopefully, we'll have fans back more regularly once the vaccines rolled out and everyone, we got a little herd immunity going on. So that'll be nice. Hopefully we'll have fans back. 2021, 2022 season will be a little bit back to normal. And I think it's only going to go up. I think next year's just going to be better. And I'm very excited for next year. But yeah, as of now, Sundays are a little more depressing. I know typically we're doing podcast stuff on a Sunday preparation. So that keeps me occupied. But again, we're talking football. So it just gets me excited.
Yeah, man. Premier League mornings starting at 7:30 in the morning just don't really fill the same void that the football Sunday at 1 p.m. starts. Can't sleep in, can't do what you want to do. So speaking of soccer, Pat, what I learned this week is that my man Neymar has to be the best brother in the world. Like this dude, it is now 2021. Starting in 2015. This dude has missed the time with Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain every single year because of his sister's birthday. The last 5 years, Neymar has been injured on his sister's birthday. So he has been granted special access to go home and rehab in Brazil. I just every single year this guy is hurt and then goes home to hang out and party with his sister, goes clubbing, throws these massive extravagant birthday parties, dude. Neymar's the best brother ever. This guy was even suspended before so that he could go home and hang out with his sister on her birthday. Like, Neymar's the best brother ever, man. This guy gets paid $500,000 a week, man, and this is what he's doing. I think it's fantastic. I think it's hilarious, and Neymar's a great brother. That's what I learned.
Yeah, and I know we're both siblings. You have 3 brothers. I have 3 brothers. I don't know if for a brother we'd be doing that type of thing, leaving work and just to throw me on unpaid leave. I'm going for a birthday. So I
got to go to Brazil real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'll be back in 4 days. Like, especially at his level, obviously he's one of the best soccer players in the world. So family comes first, I guess, for a lot of those guys. So yeah, good for him. I'm sure his sister's lucky.
I just think that is so funny. Yeah, shout out Neymar, shout out his sister. Happy birthday to Neymar's sister, I guess, from the Right Off the Bus family to yours, man. But Pat, it was another fun episode, man. We have such a blast doing this. We appreciate every listen, every like, follow, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, guys. Boost the algorithm for us. So we do really appreciate it. Having Jeff Lemieux on this week was awesome, talking NFL, talking UFC, doing what we do. We love it, guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, like I said, throw those likes, throw those subscribes. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, take care, guys. And again, check out Matt Melody on Apple Music and Spotify, and Instagram and Twitter as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Peace.